$10 million a week. This is how much Michael Franzese was stealing from the US government at the height of his career. So how exactly did a guy who never wanted to be part of the Mafia join and become one of the highest earners alongside the likes of Al Capone? Well, today we take a look at the story of Michael Franzese, an ex-captain in the Colombo family who defrauded the US government out of $250 million. Michael Franzese was born in 1951 Brooklyn and was the son of John "Sonny" Franzese, who was the underboss of the Colombo family, one of the 5 New York Mafia families. Michael said growing up as a kid, his family was under investigation by 7 different organizations like the FBI and the IRS and others, which led to his family hating law enforcement for harassing them.
Back then, they had 7 or 8 different agencies following my dad, and they'd have a car parked around my house 24/7. So wherever we went, I was one of 7 kids. We had a parade of law enforcement vehicles following us. And I got into many scuffles with them, had many incidents, and so I grew up hating them.
But growing up, he didn't see his father bring the Mafia life home. He was never encouraged to join the Mafia by his father. In fact, Sonny didn't want Michael to join the Mafia. He wanted him to go to school and become a doctor. And Michael was actually a pre-med student, until Sonny got charged and arrested for setting up a string of nationwide bank robberies. Michael said that he asked his dad in prison if he did it, and he swears that he didn't. It didn't really make sense either. Why would the underboss of a Colombo family rob a bank, or set up some bank robberies? It's like the GTA 4 bank heist mission. With 6 stars, the heat is just way too high. It just doesn't sound like something the Mafia would approve of. But Sonny gets 50 years in prison in 1967, which is assumed to be a death sentence, because he's like 50 at the time. Michael now has a choice. He can either go to med school and become a doctor, or help support his family and free his dad from prison by going out on the street to make money, and we know what choice he ended up making. What's strange is this really sounds like a lot like the plot to Godfather 1. Vito doesn't want Michael to join the family business, but he doesn't really have much of a choice either. Michael tells his dad in prison of his plan to drop out of school to earn for the family, and even though Sonny doesn't want him to join the Mafia or be on the street, he tells him if he's gonna do it, he's gotta do it the right way, by becoming a made man, an official member of the Colombo family.
I stood in front of the boss, held out my hand, takes a knife, cuts my finger, some blood drops on the floor. This is the blood oath. I cupped my hands, he took a picture of a saint, Catholic altar clock, put it on my hands, lit it aflame. Didn't hurt, it burned quickly, it was merely symbolic. And he said, "Tonight, Michael Franzese, you are born again into a new life, into La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours. Violate what you know about this life, betray your brothers, and you will die and burn in hell like this saint is burning in your hands." I said, "Do you accept?" "Yes, I do."
One thing that needs to be mentioned is the fact that Michael's the only one that's still alive. All the other 5 guys he got initiated with got killed. It just shows how ruthless the life really is and how smart Michael is to be alive. But it's official now. Michael's a part of the Colombo family, and he takes to the life like a fish in water. Michael had a head for business and starts building a name for himself and moving up in the family. He said he knew how to use the life and the resources at hand in the right way. He was made captain, aka Capo Regime, aka Capo, after a few years and starts to make a name for himself. You can tell from the way that he speaks in interviews, podcasts and conversation, he's a calm and collected man who speaks very intelligently. He doesn't say more than needed, which is probably why he survived this long in the life. It's also why a lot of the details and the names and the specifics of his story are hard to find and pinpoint. Even though Michael's done a lot of podcasts and interviews, he doesn't ever really say more than what's needed. In 1981, Michael's approached by Lawrence Salvatore Rizzo, who needs Michael's help. He was getting shaken down for $7,000 by another organization. He comes to Michael for help and says that he's getting extorted and he would rather do business with Michael. Michael makes the other guys go away, but before agreeing to join with Larry, he sends someone to watch the gas business to see if it's worth getting into. He sends one of his associates, a butcher, who comes to Michael's house with a big box of money that Michael thinks is some meat. It's $320,000, which is the first week's take. Michael sees the potential and over 7 years grows the business from that $320K a week to $10 million a week. So how exactly did Michael do it? Well, a wholesale gasoline distributor in Panama gets an order from Company A, and the record of the sale goes to Company A. But the gasoline is shipped to Company C. Company A sells the gasoline to Company B on paper. Company B is a dummy corporation registered to receive gas. They forge the tax documents sent to Company C, and in 6 months, Company B is written off and closed down. The way the tax system was set up back then meant that it was a lot slower than today, and gas companies had 10 months to file their taxes before the IRS came looking. Before they turned up, Michael and the boys cashed out and closed the company just before the feds came knocking. And they repeated this over and over. Michael had 18 shell companies licensed to collect tax on each gallon of gasoline, and he had about 350 gasoline stations. The Gasoline supplied between 1/3 and 1/2 of all the gasoline sold in New York metropolitan area. And people loved it because they were selling it cheaper than the legit gas station companies. Michael was making a lot of money and people were getting cheaper gas. It's a win-win. The only victim was the government. The money was laundered through different businesses into offshore bank accounts in Austria and Panama. And Michael set up a film production company in Miami called Miami Gold, and even produced a film that starred Sammy Davis Jr. Michael was balling out. He bought luxury homes in California and Florida on the beach, and he had his own private jet and helicopter pad. And in 1986, Fortune magazine listed Francis as number 18 on its list of 50 most powerful and wealthy mafia bosses. Fun fact though, Michael's the only one that's still alive. All the others are dead or they died in prison. But Michael's gas tank started running empty. The feds couldn't figure out how Michael was making this much money, especially out of gasoline, and eventually one of his partners got arrested for a different crime. But he became an informant and testified against Michael in 1986. Francis pled guilty to 1 count of racketeering conspiracy and 1 count of tax conspiracy. He got 10 years in prison and was ordered to pay $14.7 million in restitution on the federal charges. He agreed to sell his assets, including a mansion in Old Brookville, New York, the Miami Gold production company, and use the proceeds from Knights of the City film. In prison, Michael did 3 years in solitary confinement.
Locked me up that night. It was the worst night of my life. And that's the night that I really, first time, cried out to God and said, if you're really up there, you need to help me, because I can't deal with this.
Michael was released on November 7th, 1994, and retired from the mob in 1995. Now, people don't just retire from the Mafia. You don't just hand in your resignation and then leave. Once you join, you're in it for life, or you die. In fact, he had multiple contracts on his life. And Michael's own father approved a hit out on him for leaving the Mafia, which Michael wasn't upset about, and he actually understood because his dad was old school and he always honored the rules. In fact, Sonny never snitched on anyone for a crime that he didn't commit. He sat the 50 years, expected to die in prison, which he didn't, he survived. Michael moved to California to leave the life behind with his wife and children. And he was actually stated to not have given the authorities any information of use on anyone, and said himself that he never ratted or gave the feds any information that would put anyone away. And it's the reason why he's still alive to this day.
I don't believe that it's my job to help the government and go around and put people in jail.
Since then, Michael's changed his whole life around and does motivational speaking and has renounced the mob. He does YouTube videos, podcasts, and interviews talking about his time in the Mafia. Since his release in 1994, he's publicly renounced and denounced the life of organized crime, saying, "I never glamorized the mob life. It's an evil life, and I don't know one family that's a part of the mob life that hasn't been totally devastated." He has since become a motivational speaker for youth at schools, prisons, and other venues. He also speaks at Christian conferences and churches. It just goes to show that it's never too late to turn your life around and start making the right choices.